There are 2 billion people, more than 2 billion people on Facebook. That's more than the number, it's about the number of notional followers of Christianity. People check their phones 150 times a day, the millennial sort of audience. And so if you think about it, from the moment you wake up, it's like you're jacked in to this environment. And thoughts start streaming into your head, designed by a few technology companies.
There's always this narrative that technology is neutral and it's up to us to choose how we use it. This is just not true.
Technology is not neutral.
It's not neutral. They want you to use it in particular ways and for long periods of time because that's how they make their money.
1 billion of us own a smartphone, and we know how addicting it can be. One former Google employee says this is no accident. Indeed, it is by design. And he became troubled by the relentless efforts of app developers to keep us glued to the gadgets. So Tristan Harris founded an organization called Time Well Spent. He's asking the tech industry to bring what he calls ethical design to its products. NewsHour special correspondent Kat Wise has more, part of our ongoing collaboration with The Atlantic.
I noticed when I was at Stanford, there was a class called the Persuasive Technology Design class, and there's a whole lab at Stanford that teaches students how to apply persuasive psychology principles into technology to persuade people to use products in a certain way. So it's not about giving you all this freedom, it's about sucking you in to take your time.
So the goal is to keep us on our devices longer. Why?
For any company whose business model is advertising or engagement-based advertising, meaning they care about the amount of time someone spends on the product, they make more money the more time people spend. So the game becomes, how can I throw different persuasive techniques to get people to stay, to spend as long as possible, and to come back tomorrow.
And it's clearly working. Today, wherever we go, we're inevitably surrounded by fellow citizens staring into their phones.
So we're turning to it more and more often. We check our phones about 150 times a day.
And what are the costs of that sort of constant interaction with technology, both on an individual level and as a society?
Well, I think each of us have to tune in for our own experience. I mean, what does it feel like when we check our phones 150 times a day? Or what does it feel like if we've been scrolling and had our face down and not breathing very much when we're scrolling for, say, 20 minutes? I mean, how do we feel on the inside?
How do you feel on the inside?
I feel like I don't feel very good after that. I feel like my anxiety goes up. I feel more concerned about what I'm missing. What I'm missing out on, who I haven't gotten back to. People think that I'm bad at getting back to them. All of this sort of psychology emerges all because of this one thing in my pocket. And we've never had a media device that literally 1 billion people are kind of being programmed in the same way, where so much influence is in the hands of a few technology designers.
It sounds like there's just a lot of sort of trickery going on here.
I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem to get people's attention at all costs.
It is, in large part, our id writ large.
How so?
Well, you mentioned all those things, the sort of primal drives.
Mm-hmm.
There's all the things that we like and hate and fear. They're all there on the internet. They're a projection of our limbic system. It's true.
No, it makes sense. And the thinking of it as thinking of corporations and just thinking of just human beings communicating online through these social media networks as some sort of an organism it's a cyborg. It's a combination. It's a combination of electronics and biology.
Yeah.
Does this
in some measure, like, is the success of these online systems is sort of a function of how much limbic resonance they're able to achieve with people. The more limbic resonance, the more engagement.
Whereas, like, one of the reasons why probably Instagram is more enticing than Twitter.
limbic resonance.
Yeah.
Our next guest called them, quote, a living, breathing crime scene for what happened in the 2016 election. Tristan Harris is a former design ethicist for Google and has been called the closest thing Silicon Valley has to a conscience by the Atlantic magazine. He joins us now here in the studio. Tristan, great to have you here
Thanks
on
for
the
having
show.
me.
So what did you hear today that makes you think things are any worse or better than perhaps you would have thought?
Well, I think no matter what these companies want to say that they do, they've unleashed Pandora's box. They've unleashed this civilization-scale mind control machine. Never before in history have 50 engineers, 20 to 30 years old, living in San Francisco, where we are right now, influenced what 1 billion people are thinking and doing with their time and their attention. And we've enabled this channel that's exploiting people's cognitive biases. We're exploiting people's psychology. And we have to ask ourselves, what do we actually care about? Should these products be designed for addiction, which is what they're designed for now? And this has huge public health consequences for children.
What are the consequences?
Well,
we had Jim Steyer of Common Sense Media on the show yesterday, and there really isn't a lot of research on how tech impacts children, shockingly, given that there's so much concern about it, but we actually don't know.
Well, there's a great article by Jean Twenge that got a lot of traction called Have Smartphones Destroyed a Generation? And it talks about many of the cultural and social impacts of how addiction to smartphones have changed our relationship. People are more isolated, more depressed, and if you just look at the dynamics, Snapchat, for example, puts the number of days in a row that you sent a message as a kid to all of your friends. And they're inventing this number. It's a persuasive, manipulative design technique to keep 2 kids on the hook, to keep this ball getting tossed back and forth every day. If they stop throwing the ball back and forth, they lose the number. And so kids start defining the currency of their friendship based on whether they're sending this empty message back and forth. And so you have literally, Snapchat's the #1 way for teenagers in the US to communicate. So you have 100 million teenagers that are basically out there throwing empty messages back and forth. Is any of this designed to help us, or is this just to addict us? Do thousands of people wake up and say, gosh, how can we strengthen the public square? No. Thousands of people go to work, asked to drive up one number, which is how much are people engaging with and increasing the time they spend on these services. I want to live in a world where the tech industry is actually about helping humanity, and there's a lot of ways they can do that. And so we started this nonprofit, Time Well Spent, that's basically about changing and realigning technology with human values and what technology is supposed to be for. Why in the world would we not have it be that way?